sit back on your blankets, fold your legs, then refold them the second crossing. I have to change my view. There. Okay, so you're on the different crossing. And if you have difficulties with the knees, ankles, hips because of this, you can add more height to account for it. You accommodate to the second crossing, however you might need to. Second crossing. For most of us, there's this customary crossing. If you just come into the pose, it's what you're habituated to. Do the other one. Gradually, if you do this enough, you get so you can't remember which is the normal side and which is the odd side, because they both work their way into the muscles, joints, bones, and also the nervous system and the memory. So it starts feeling comfortable. And when that happens, you have to start finding other ways of keeping track. And you can use your imagination. That's what it's for. Somebody is giving me feedback, so, okay. Thank you. So, now everybody's muting herself. Great. Okay. So being creative, some people suggest, what day of the month is it? What's the number of the day? If you can remember the date, then if it's and I believe, Karen, you should know what day it is. What the date is. Is it an even day where you might take your first crossing? Is it an odd day where you would take your other crossing? So you have a reminder every day to shift. You might come up with another device, but find a way to become regular. Then draw your spine up straight, settling the buttocks down. You need to make use of gravity. You need to really become quite sensitive to gravity, which doesn't mean fall down, but it means make use of the ground. At first, you have to do active things, wake up the feet, right? Stretch your toes, press the outer foot down. Activating the length of the calf, if possible through to the big toe. I know for some of you there's a curve, but you work on extension. And in so doing, you can settle that thigh down, assuming you're sitting high enough. So you begin to actually be able to respond to gravity, not just know it's there, right? But you can begin to respond to it through your actions and your sensitivity. So to respond to it, you have to become deeply familiar with it. So this is where Prashant says, asana means seat. Seat means a stable resting place. There's a gravity to that word. There's a physical gravity. And when you find the alignment that gives you sort of a sensitivity to that gravity, you begin to be able to respond more deeply. The breath and mind begin to coordinate. As at first, this pose comes from the floor up. That's your physical action to connect to the gravity, which is the nature of this situation. And after you establish your awareness of that, you begin to be able to interact. And that means the pose starts emanating, instead of from the ground up, it emanates from the brain down. So you're doing both. You're coming up from gravity and you're settling. Now it's the back of the skull, the spine, the shoulder blades that settle down and spread away. They settle down and they spread away. All the way down, all the way down into the low back. Might be Marcia Hayden, but if you're coming on, please mute yourself, Marcia. Buttocks down, spreading. Inner body lifting. The side ribs can release down as the inner body comes up. Join your palms. Make your brain quiet. As soon as the brain starts connecting, the breath changes. Work on that interaction between the body, breath, and mind. In that is yoga. So in this way, we honor the lineage of the sage Patanjali. Bow to this practice. Keep your trunk lifted and that brain soft. Breath soft and full. Release your hands. Slowly raise your head and open your eyes. Now, stretch your legs. Help your leg if there's stiffness. And if possible, if your hips and flexibility allow it, sit on the floor in Dandasana. Now, your feet can be slightly apart, hip width apart in your Dandasana, or they can be joined in this more rigorous and formal pose. You can also sit on blankets, because part of the relationship to gravity means your butt bones have to really be able to point down. If you see this, if you're on the back of the pelvis towards your tailbone, your ability to respond to gravity, your ability to have a complete relationship with it is compromised. So if you really move toward gravity, you feel gravity better with the thigh, with the buttocks, and you come up through the trunk, shoulders back. Now, engage the legs, stretch your legs straight. Whether the feet are joined or apart, the leg itself becomes compact. Outer calf, inner leg stretching, outer thigh, inner thigh. The outer thigh and front thigh, especially engaged toward the hip. And you can even use your hand as if you were taking hold, clamping that femur bone and pulling the bone and the muscle attached to it toward the socket. So that cylinder of the femur, you want to draw back the hamstring part of it, the side of it, and go down. You can use your hands for support. Yes, when the spine has difficulty, needs help, go up. Take support. Now, when you lift the spine, some of you are lifting the tailbone, okay? Don't lift the tailbone. The buttocks and the tailbone point down. You come up from the inner body. This is part of what sits down, not your spine, this muscle, so that the buttock bones and tailbone point down. Okay, relax. Bend your knees. And take your legs wide apart, Upavishta Konasana. Now the same rule applies. Sit as high as you may need to keep the spine upright. It is generally easier to do this in Upavishta than Dandasana. Perhaps you feel that. Now, this part of the leg, as if I were holding with the same clamp, the inner thigh, right? And all this strong inner thigh muscle, I'm just taking hold of it as a unit, and I'm not trying to cause injury, but I want to make an extension from the groin to the knee. Outer thigh to the hip, inner thigh. Just release the flesh as if you're talking to the bone, tucking it into the socket. Now release that flesh. And I'm reaching my foot out in kind of response. Now, if you're not comfortable because you've overdone something, you just pick up your hips and back up 1/2 inch, which means the angle of the legs closes just slightly, right? So if the pressure is too much, back off. Otherwise, something is really reflecting.
Yes.
Oh, I see it. I'm looking at the camera.
Yes.
Work. It's too much. Oh, this is, all right. That's better.
You're in the sky.
Okay, I beg your pardon. I saw it, but I didn't get the point. It's never happened before. Must have been a cloudy day. Oh, where was I? For those whose groins are open, who feel this action is working. Sorry, I'm gonna go sideways. So if this pose is working and you've got your tucks and your releases and all that happening, you, instead of relieving pressure by sitting back, you might stretch out through those groins and move your buttocks forward. Right? This is all according to if you can get this interaction, it's not just muscle activity. You also have to keep your brain soft and responsive. And then can you sit up, either hands behind or hands on the knees or hands in front. Now, sit up straight. I like the hands in front. It gives me a bit of leverage to lift my chest, and it allows me to settle better toward gravity with these thighs. Push the thigh down, stretching out. My arms are describing. Yes, if you have balance, this is fine. If you have balance, go for this. Okay. Turn the arms. So there is a lift in the ribs. If possible, go on up. Now see what's happening both at this pelvic juncture and also at this shoulder, neck, head juncture. That interaction sometimes gets blocked by the difficulty, just the physical difficulty. Exhale, come out. So you get caught up instead in just this, intense doing. You're working on the posture. This is the ordinary struggle beginning with yoga, but that's not just getting competent at this doing and being able to maintain this doing is not the end of it, because if you stop there, you miss the yoga, which is the integration of the seating of the mind.
Hey, Devon.
The seating. So this pose is coming from, it starts from the floor up, and it winds up coming from the skull down.
Hey, Devon.
Who's talking?
I'm sorry.
Leanne. Yes.
When you're in this pose, should you strive to keep?
You can stay or come out.
Pardon me?
You can also repeat the pose through this question. So keep going, Leanne.
Okay. Are you striving to kind of get wider and wider and wider so that you're constantly, taut, pulling in?
This is the doing part. And at first there is, and furl, by at first, I mean the first 10 to 20 years. There is an intense amount of effort to really maintain the engagement and extension through the legs and to keep the proper directions of movement. But I'm telling you that if you stop at just what your triceps and biceps and shoulder blades and hamstrings and quads and this crampy thing in the outer hip, can you manage to keep that from cramping? If you gain control of all that, that's still not the end of it, right? That's just the control of the physical.
Okay.
So in other words, release the arms. That's just control of the physical plant of this operation here.
Yeah. Got it.
it's a control of, Prashant puts it, posture. And when you start, instead of working from the ground up, it starts from the ground up, starts with the organs of action, putting you in a pose, hopefully correctly. But at any stage of the game in the pose, you can stop for reversing the direction after establishing the base, then release the pose from the brain and breath. So the brain seats. This is the idea. First part is posture. The second part is asana. Come out, turn to the right, only as much as you can. Each stage of this, reestablishing the base of the pose, that's that physical gravity, and being able to use it to lift up, being able to use it to give a lift internally, so the lungs can come up and open equally. Your head turns wherever direction the neck finds comfortable. Line up with your sternum. Look toward the one shoulder, look toward the other. Each step of the way, you take a pause to integrate from the brain down. So often that is done with an exhalation, but not always. Change sides if you have not. Sit square, get normal for a second, find out what that revolving did, and turn the other way. So here's another way to think about it. When you are stretching your legs and drawing those shoulder blades back and lifting your ribs, I guess I'll get back in full view. When you're doing all those physical things, keep going. Shoulder blades back. Even up those ribs. Make sure the back right ribs are moving forward. Keep that back right buttock grounded. This is quite difficult. Turn your head the other way. And see if that gives you any more rotation or less rotation. Keep the legs stretching. Come out. Okay. Bend. Let's see. Keep the legs apart. Bend your, right leg. Now, if you need knee protection, insert some spacer behind the knee if it is needed. Let the knee come out. Also, if you need height because something has changed in the pelvis and you can't be upright because there's usually a tension in this front hip. Oh, sorry, I want to change gears about that in regard to that front hip. here's where I'm going. I'm going toward Supta Virasana. So for those who don't need support, it is Virasana. And then you lie back. This is an enormous stretch of the front thigh. Unless you've been here before, this back body has to go toward your knees. This front thigh goes toward the knees. This front trunk goes toward the chest. Now you see how I'm rock and rolling. So I get gravity to help me relax this chest, and now I can stretch my front thighs. And I keep letting this body settle. Gravity. Okay. That would be the full pose. And you come up, lifting your chest. Okay. Now, if you have trouble with that, which I grant you can happen, you bring this sticky mat up to the edge of your chair seat. You don't really need a sticky, and you get a brick just in case. And it would go up here, oddly. So then you put your back ribs against this chair and come up with your chest on that chair. So you have the same actions. Buttocks going toward the knees, legs, lower leg stretches toward your feet, front thigh toward the knee, and the front chest up toward that chair. Now your arms could go through the chair, and if the chest opens well enough, you don't need the brick. You just stretch straight. The brick is to give your skull a rest. Now go into this pose as you can. I see many of you know about bolsters, and you are more than welcome. Now, Gay, let those hips come up, hips up, so that front thigh stretches. You need the length of the front thigh. So the hips must come up. And Chaya, I know there's low back issues, so I hope you're accounting for them and keeping yourself out of pain. Yes? Can you keep that low back safe and stretch your front thighs away from the hip? Now, here's where Prashant's metaphor of the consciousness being like liquid makes a great deal of sense. That front thigh awareness has to flow toward the knee. Keep your knee safe. Don't pull those muscles away from the knee. And release the abdomen toward the floor and let the inner body flow toward the ribs and chest. Widen the diaphragm. If possible, the hips higher, hips on a tall brick height. If your leg allows it, so you feel like you're perched on your tailbone. That pelvis turns a little bit, so you're not sitting on your buttock bones, but kind of on that back pelvis. Now, almost time to come up. So Karen, with the knees not supported, yes, let the knees roll up. Just like that. Let the knees roll up so that maximizes the front hip extension. Yes? Send the front thigh toward the knee and the pelvis toward the ribs. So you optimize is the better word, that front hip. And that includes not just the surface but the depth as well. And before you come up, if possible, you come up if you need to, no problem. But at first, as we were discussing before, the stretch feels very superficial. I mean, sharp and, pointy. And as the pose progresses and as the groins relax, the sense of the pose deepens, gets less superficial, and allows the intelligence and the openings to penetrate deeper into the hip joints, into the groins, and ultimately the inner body. So that's going, and this is what I was starting to say before. Prashant says the physical stuff is the gross body. When you start getting these deeper releases, these where the brain and the breath start feeling like they're fully connected, that's where you can become subtle. Posture is gross, external. Asana is subtle. You have to get to that point where the brain starts being able to go in to find its own gravity. Come out. Lift your chest. And keep yourself careful as you come out. You can come onto your knees symmetrically. Turn your toes under symmetrically. Stretch those toes. Now release these groins, the fold of the groins, and then lift up. Symmetrical even in the knees. This doesn't have to be dog pose or uttanasana. It can be anything in between. Just stretch your legs. Now, let's get formal about Adho Mukha Svanasana. So all that Supta Virasana opening, I hope, can inform what goes on in dog pose. What came before that, just as a reminder, was Dandasana, Upavishta Konasana, and the Parshvas, all of which involve this sense of ground of the legs. So you're reversing that now. The legs, actually, you're not reversing it in the inner body. The brain is still looking to its ground, which is the root of the spine. The legs still have to activate to give you that ground and the release from it. Likewise, the arms. It's in fact the same. Engage with gravity. Stretch your arm fully. And the sooner you can establish that long stretch, straight legs, straight arms, triceps rolled in, biceps out, spine stretching straight, sides of the neck long. You know, a lot of these postural, and you can feel, if you're paying attention, you can just stretch through all your fingers. And at the end of all this outer body consideration, you have to search for, is my brain connected? Have I brought the mind to a stable condition? Come out, rest. And you know it's going towards stability and this integrative thing that is yoga, process that's yoga, because the breath starts changing. It stops being something that is a physical, pump. It starts being more subtle. and you can feel it. Take another dog pose. Oh, beg pardon. This time, with a brick between these top thighs, and your feet are close enough to comfortably hold this brick so it doesn't fall out, okay? Those who are quite thin, there might be somebody in here. You can turn the brick sideways if that seems more comfortable to you. Most people like the narrow brick. It's up to you. And push it so that it's partly back, partly forward, instead of a lot forward. You don't want it running into your abdomen, and you walk back in dog pose, not dropping that brick. Your feet might even be able to join. This is all what's comfy to you. Now, on either side of that brick, which is the pelvic side and the knee side of that brick, I don't want to keep you long, so stay focused. That groin wants to be able to lengthen in both directions. So the only way to be able to do that is set up your feet very nicely. Get the outer calf and inner calf activated. Wait for all 5 toes in each foot to be able to lengthen. And then you lift the outer thigh and front thigh to the hip. These instructions should sound familiar. And then using the block, not trying to grip it, but use it as a little biofeedback device. Lengthen the groin inward toward the sacrum, as much as you might be stretching the heels back and maybe taking them down to the floor. Watch what's going on in the arms. Keep your elbows straight, triceps rolling. And you know it's going well at the upper body because you can keep that brain soft. And the descent of the brain means it's going toward the tailbone, the subtle part of the brain, the mind. Come out, exhaling. Okay.
Devon, I didn't quite understand the groins and the sacrum relationship that you were talking about.
Groins and sacrum.
Yeah, you said
what
that
pose?
In the last pose we were in dog pose.
Oh, the lengthening of the groins does not stop at the pubis. The groin, the literal anatomical groin, goes through this, outward, again, outer body barrier. It goes way deep in,
into
close
the
to. Yes, okay. Absolutely. These groin muscles connect to the inner surface of your sacrum.
Inner surface. Oh, okay. All right.
Lumbar spine. Your psoas muscle, major groin muscle, connects to literally every vertebra of your sacrum and your lumbar spine up to the 12th thoracic, lowest thoracic vertebra. Right. And it's connected to the discs in between those vertebrae.
Okay. But I never thought of it as into the sacrum.
Well, here you are with that brick between your thighs. The point being, just be able to lengthen the groins. When you do that, this inner, to separate my feet, this inner body just lifts. There's like no tension in those abdominal organs, and they recede away from the floor toward the tailbone sacrum,
Okay. Thank
which
you.
is the root of the spine.
Mm-hmm.
That's the subtle ground.
Thank you.
Yes?
You want me to do it?
Okay. And it goes, yes. And it goes from, yes, of course, do a dog. We have time, at least a minute. Make that pose, release the root of the spine through the legs, gain control of those shoulders so you release the neck and throat with the arms, and then using the lift of the groins, that release comes to the inner surface of the sacrum, tailbone. Can you feel it? That receding. If you don't feel it, raise the heels.
No, I feel it.
Everything else. Now, keep going. The brain has to release toward its root, which is that same groin, tailbone. Thighs back. Skull connected, not just legs. Okay, come on.
Thank you. Yeah, that gives you the depth in the groin.
Yes, yes,
Just
yes.
the length.
And it should give you a sense that the groin can move freely in both directions, right? There's not a healthy time when that abdomen pushes the groin toward the feet, like the inner body toward the feet. That's it. There's selective movements like that when we urinate and defecate and bear children, right? Selective efforts. Most of the time, we don't push downward.
Thank you.
Oh, there's also, sorry to be so graphic, there's also passing gas. I can't think of anything else. If you think of something that's like a valid down push, go ahead, let me know. All right. Now, we've got to do an intermediate pose, and my current favorite is Ardha Chandrasana. So get yourself a brick for your right side and your left side. And as you may need, get a wall. The wall can be used against the foot of the lifted leg, whereas the rest of you is free balancing. You can also use the wall to rest against. You can't see it, but trust me, I am leaning. So you can use the wall either way. You can also be freestanding out in the room. But you climb in that pose, and then everybody bend both knees. And I'm showing this at an angle so you see it in the camera, but the leg actually turns straight, not internal. And first you want to straighten the standing leg, keeping an imaginary block on the groin and pressing outward through the foot, lift that outer thigh so that there is a push to the inner foot and a release of the abdomen away from that. Then you stretch the lifted leg. Push out through the heel. Both buttocks, which you cannot see, they're between me and the wall, those buttocks have to go toward your lifted heel. Move your front body the other way. For some of us, it turns out if you press your heel to the wall, I'll show you. I'll show this way. If you press this top heel to the wall, it might help you lever this standing leg, buttock, outer hip forward, so you can roll that pose. And stretch your arms. So if you're at a wall, your top shoulder should come to the wall. Go ahead, give it a try again. Heel to the wall or back to the wall. Stretch that standing leg, Kay. Standing leg, outer thigh, back. That looks good, Chaya. Roll that top shoulder up. Your hand can be on the hip or stretching up. Karen, you've got the edge of that cabinetry that you're with. Your top arm can hold on to it and help you open your chest. Leanne, that's good. Keep the back heel in.
That way.
Find these leg actions. Come out when you need to. Bend the standing leg. Come. Yes, I hear you.
Leanne,
yeah.
When you're standing, I'm supposing that one, if you're on your left leg, your foot is straight forward. And then is this the raised leg, is the heel in line with is your right heel in line with your left heel when you're up?
Let me say, watch, because I'm going toward and away from the camera, so maybe you can see that.
Yeah.
In the classical pose, am I showing it? No, you can't see my back foot. I'll raise it up a little too high, but you can see it. See, back heel is in line with my front. Now, when I do Ardha Chandrasana, I want this, I can move this foot further back, which makes me have to do more.
Oh yeah, right.
To open that groin. But whether the leg is in classical pose, lined up straight, or back behind you, you still have to open that groin. Do you see my, no. Well, I can't raise my foot anymore. Here, lower my trunk. So you see where my foot is.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can move that top foot back.
Okay.
But the classical pose is kind of the shape you have against the wall. I hope the rest of you, I see some of you are on side 2. Please take side 2. Now, Radha, this is maybe a difficult side for you. That back leg has to lift more. So start by bending the front leg, the standing leg. And then in that standing leg shape, here's your left side. In that bent leg shape, roll. This is buttock bone and buttock bone. So roll your buttock bones to the ceiling, buttock bones to the ceiling, and straighten that leg. You have to be able to do that turn, Chaya. Because that instead of not turning and just trying to lift this leg, it's going to give you a big cramp. So to do it, you have to turn the pelvis. And that way you can breathe and start getting some subtlety. Stretch through that top leg. Lift your chest. And you come out sideways. It helps. And then turn the feet. And then bring the feet together. Okay. Are you all right?
good, Devon. So both buttock bones are going to the ceiling?
Yeah, watch from behind. I'm going to do my other side. Sorry. I've been doing one side too long. So from the back, I bend both knees and my shirt's up, so I hope you can see all my folds and such. So the first thing, here's a buttock bone, here's a buttock bone. I have to make sure those buttock bones aren't looking toward the floor. Those buttock bones have to look toward the wall behind me. So that's this turn, right? That hula.
Yeah.
I'm doing the hula. And then I keep the outer thigh firm and I release the inner thigh so the leg straightens. And then I take that top leg straight. Maybe I have to get away from the wall. And then this buttock goes toward that heel. This sacroiliac goes toward that heel too. They don't go down toward the floor. They go back.
Okay.
Not toward the floor. They go back.
So
that's why you bend the knees. To get that rotation. Okay? Now, you are very familiar with my butt. Big part. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Now, we have to move along. Do you need to try that? Were you trying it while I was demonstrating? Are you okay? Shall we proceed? Yes? Okay. Chair. At the wall. Protect your wall if you need to with some padding. Or let the chair come to the wall. Then you probably need a blanket on the floor. So I would take a blanket, fold it in half like a rectangle, and it'll go. I'm gonna change this, for the brain. Take your blanket and fold it. I hope you can do this. I'll show sideways. This is the length of my fingers right here. So I slide my fingers under the edge of this blanket and I fold it over my fingers and I iron it out. And then I can fold it again. Doesn't matter what width, because it's the top width that counts. The rest of this, just make sure it's centered and stable. So some blankets, if you only get 3 folds, not 4, that's great. It's the size of the blanket that determines. All I'm saying is you need your top fold, that width, finger length width. The rest of it can be, look, it could look like that. Oh, can you see that back there? That shape. It can be super wide on the bottom. Just has to be narrow on top. Clear?
Yep.
Take that blanket, put it on the floor. I can't tell you exactly where it goes. You're going to have to experiment. But it's approximately an arm's length, but not quite, but almost, from the shoulder to the hand. See, not right. Much better. Do you see?
Mm-hmm.
This goes under a bit of my neck, all the way down to my tailbone, and my hands can clasp the front legs of the chair straight. Are we there? Now, keep watching. But actually, you should set that up and then watch.
Yeah.
Make sure this is set correctly, because the rest is just doing. So get your props right. You want to make sure your neck is supported and the base of the skull and the skull are off the blanket. The tailbone may or may not be. It depends on the length of your blanket. And then your arms stretch out to the chair. So if your props are set correctly, roll to your side, sit up, and show me you're ready to watch the rest of it, or else I'll keep waiting. And those who aren't showing up in pictures, I'm just assuming you're keeping pace with the group or taking good notes. So watch. If you're stiff, your feet go to the sides of the chair, okay? If you're more flexible, your heels go to the front edge. Pull the chair down, roll your shoulders, physical actions. Some of you already, the neck and throat will feel tight. So roll those shoulder blades and let go your skull. Then you roll your tailbone up. And you see their physical adjustments. My neck just gets longer a little bit as the skull turns. Now I'm rolling the arms down and I'm really trying to tuck this outer arm to the floor. So the spine gets lifted by that folded blanket. And you keep going as long as you can maintain a connection between that skull, neck, chest, body. Connectivity counts. Don't just force yourself into a folded neck. And I'm going to say one other thing. Some of you are up, some of you are getting ready to go up. When the neck is very stiff, sometimes a little more support is better, even though it feels quite strong on the bones, right? When there's arthritis in the neck, stiffness, compression in those vertebrae, this blanket can feel a bit like compression, but it is moving those vertebrae in the correct direction. Roll the outer arm down so that biceps is coming out. Keep the elbow straight and the hand and the shoulder both pulling down toward the floor. Roll the shoulders. Drop the throat. And stretch the arms as if they are stretching not from the shoulder joint, but the skull. So the movement of the arm to lengthen and roll that shoulder blade up. You get that back body organized comes from the skull itself. So maybe you can feel the difference between getting the arms to do this work and the legs to do this work. And there's a moment where it changes, the nature of the pose changes from outer body, arms and legs, muscles, fussing, struggling, to some amount of more integration. And if you can't arrive at that in this pose, you might need a different pose, a different version of this pose. So you can arrive at that seating, that asana. Release, come out. Chaya, is it the low back? Yes. What stops you?
My neck.
The neck. So
Yeah.
those what do you know? What is the problem with the neck apart from pain?
I put this one like a three-folded blanket.
Yes.
I think I am not sitting properly. My neck is hurting.
So you can position this neck. Some visible object. You can put the edge of that blanket like here or here or even here.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. So long as it catches on, I don't know, you can even see a little bit of redness because that's how my skin behaves if you poke on it. Anyway, that redness is right at the base of the neck. So it's not pushing here. For me, this is not a pleasant push. But if I get below that, I won't say it's pleasant because I have arthritis and stiffness here and probably some scoliosis, like it's asymmetrical. And it makes trouble. So if I get it right, and you know what I might recommend, Chaya, is that you work with a rolled sticky mat if you have a thinnish one that's not going to make too thick a diameter. You can fuller roll, but that stickiness is also helpful. So please experiment for brief periods of time, Chaya, so that you're and do sort of one experiment today. Since there's an injury, don't try everything because something will hurt and something may have helped and you won't necessarily know. So be careful. (9:04). Can I show you one other thing about this? With a sticky mat, rolled up, you can do this very same thing in a sort of lesser version at a wall. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. Get my other props out of the way. So I just find same pose, less gravity.
Okay. I tried this.
Try that one, and if that feels like it is helping, remove some of that thickness in the top shoulder, that's what it's for, that musculoskeletal thickness that prohibits subtlety. Now, last pose, since we're getting toward the end of class. And Wednesday morning classes, I have to end promptly. So last pose is a form of Shavasana. So it's possible to take that same narrow folded blanket, the very same, and have a second blanket as a head support. And if you see, I'm putting a bit of space in between my hips and that blanket so that when I lie down, I have found a comfy spot for myself against that lumbar spine. And I experiment with it all the way down because everything changes. And I, for one, have also lumbar compression. Tuck your shoulder blades. Now, Chaya, when you get here, wave an arm if your neck is comfy in this pose.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if those shoulders will not relax, a thing you can do is add a blanket support under the wrist or the hand. So your elbow drops, but the wrist is elevated. This can often relax the shoulders.
Yeah,
So
this is
additional
good.
blankets underneath the wrists, so the arms aren't flat, the wrists are elevated. Sometimes that helps. So you're good, Chaya.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, there is these at least 2 layers of comfort that I'm discussing. One is this physical body has found its ground. It's pretty easy to do in Shavasana. And from that kind of indulgence in gravity, really letting loose and letting go toward gravity. If you really get that, the body starts responding in a subtle way, and you start also feeling the lightness, the spaciousness, and the sense of the consciousness being able to flow everywhere. And the idea of the flow of consciousness is that it is interrupted by chitta vrittis, right? The chitta is made turbulent by vrittis. Vritti actually means turning. So that smooth flow of consciousness starts being interrupted by some object inserted into the flow that makes horrors. So this practice is physically stabilizing so that there are no vrittis. At least physical. The consciousness of the mind in a yogic state does not flow like water, which can be turbulent, can gather air bubbles and, babbling brooks. consciousness flows like honey. Like oil. To very smooth. So each exhalation and inhalation is a way for you to observe, first of all, physical layer and interact with, that's the subtle layer, this body and this mind in this breath by means of the breath. You can feel the turbulence of the flow in areas where there is injury or worry about an injury, memory of an injury, conscious or unconscious worry, memory. The turbulence can be gross or subtle. Now, slowly prepare to come out of this pose. Stay put. It's a subtle preparation first. Namaskar. I have to set up directly for another class. So typically on Wednesday mornings, I show up in this room a little bit early. So if you have questions before class, it's a good time to interact with me. On Wednesdays, I have to escape to go teach another one. So keep that in mind. You can also text me or contact me by other means if you have questions. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Devon.
Thank
See you
all.
later.
Thank you,
You
Devon.
did it.